Hey guys, tonight we're taking a little detour from the action-packed miracles and fire and brimstone stories of the Bible. Instead, we're going somewhere much quieter, somewhere you've probably never given much thought to, but where people in Jesus' time spent about a third of their lives. The rooftops, picture it, the air is thick with heat, cicadas chirp from somewhere under a clay pot, and a stray breeze finally rolls in off the hills. You're lying flat on your back on the hardened mud roof of your small Judean home. The stars are beginning to blink awake, and below you, a donkey just sneezed for the fourth time. It's fine. You're used to it, that you're probably imagining it's kind of peaceful. And yeah, it can be. But the truth is, you probably wouldn't survive this life for more than a day or two. Between the heat, the hygiene, and the roof collapsing under you mid-nap because of one too many goats. Let's just say your Airbnb review would not be 5 stars. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here, and if you're watching from somewhere unusual, or just curled up with your cat in the middle of nowhere, drop your location and local time in the comments. I love seeing where you're all tuning in from. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You begin by padding barefoot through a dusty alleyway in the village of Bethsaida. It's early evening, and most of the locals are climbing wooden ladders or ducking through narrow stairwells to reach their rooftops. Why? Well, homes are made of mud brick, maybe a few layers of stone if you're fancy, and the uppermost floor, that flat rooftop, is basically your all-in-one patio, bedroom, observatory, and sometimes, your kitchen. That's right. Kitchens indoors were rare. Not because people didn't want them, but because fire plus straw roofs equals one very bad idea. So instead, cooking often happened on the roof, under the open sky. If you've ever tried cooking over a flame in the summer with zero shade and a strong opinion about onions, you've lived a slice of this experience. You watch an older woman lighting a small rooftop fire pit using goat dung patties as fuel, smoky, yes, but surprisingly effective. The scent blends with baked bread, hot oil, and something vaguely herbal. Her grandkids are setting down sleeping mats, just flat pads made of woven reeds or rough-spun wool. Pillows? Optional. Back support? Non-existent. You clamber up to your own rooftop, watch your head under that low doorway, and glance out across the village. Rooftop to rooftop, families settle in. Some are eating. Some are praying. A few are just watching the sky fade from peach to indigo. It's a surprisingly social setup. People shout greetings between roofs, pass food across alleys with long sticks, or just chat like they're leaning over a neighbor's fence in the suburbs. And now that you're settled, let's talk about why this rooftop thing even started. Point 1, it's hot. Judea sits in a dry, sun-baked climate where daytime temperatures can boil your sandals. Inside those homes, it's basically a bread oven. So families climb up to sleep where the wind might maybe cool your sweat-soaked tunic. It's like air conditioning, if air conditioning were just, please God, let there be a breeze. 2. Space. Most Judean homes were small, 1, maybe 2 rooms tops. That's the whole family, the storage, the cooking gear, and probably a few chickens sharing 10 by 10 feet. So the rooftop was not a luxury, it was a necessity. Your third grader didn't get sent to the roof in anger. They went up there because there was literally nowhere else. Point 3, and this one's a little weirder, it was often safer. Yes, that's counterintuitive. But when you've got bandits on the road, livestock with bad attitudes, or unpredictable Roman patrols, being up high where you can see trouble coming, that matters. Not to mention, rooftop walls were required by biblical law, Deuteronomy 22 verse 8, to prevent people from just falling off, though, in practice, that was a guideline more than a guarantee. And then there's the social aspect. Rooftops were where deals were made, gossip was traded, and quiet prayer unfolded under the stars. Imagine ancient Judean Instagram stories, except instead of filtered selfies, you've got 2 uncles debating camel prices loud enough for the whole street to hear. You settle into a corner of the rooftop. The mud plaster under you is warm from the day's sun. You think of Jesus as a boy, climbing to his own family's rooftop in Nazareth, probably barefoot, possibly tripping over a stray clay jar. Was he annoyed by noisy neighbors? Did he whisper prayers before bed? Maybe he counted stars like sheep. Fun fact, some Judean kids learned to recognize constellations, not for poetry, but for navigation. Knowing when and where certain stars appeared helped with planting, travel, and even religious festivals. So when the stars came out, people didn't just say, "Oh pretty." They said, "Cool, time to plan the barley harvest." Here's a quirky little tidbit, some homes actually had rooftop pigeon towers. Yes, people farmed pigeons. Not just for messaging, but for meat, eggs, and fertilizer. Imagine trying to sleep under the stars with 30 pigeons cooing 2 feet from your face. Ah, serenity. As you drift closer to sleep, you begin to notice small details. The crackle of a neighbor's fire. Someone laughing softly across the alley. The night breeze stirring dry reeds stacked near the edge of the roof. A dog barks once, far off, then stops. The stars above feel close enough to reach. Historians still argue whether rooftop life was purely practical or whether it developed into a kind of spiritual rhythm, connecting sky, earth, and home. Was it just about staying cool, or did something deeper happen under the stars? We may never know, but for now, it's peaceful. You're here. And you're starting to get sleepy. You wake, well, drift, from the edge of sleep to the faint sound of a goat chewing something that probably isn't food. Welcome to Nazareth, sometime in the early years of the 1st century. The stars have dimmed just slightly, a sign that dawn's about an hour off. And yes, you're still on a rooftop, still wrapped in a blanket that's more scratchy than cozy, and still regretting that evening cup of fermented date juice. You shift slightly, trying to avoid a lump under your mat. It's either a loose stone or a very sleepy lizard. Either way, it's not moving. Beside you, someone in the neighboring house sneezes, followed by a sleepy, Baruch Atah Adonai, the start of a morning blessing. You're not sure whether to reply or pretend you're still asleep. Life in Nazareth is quiet, but not in a peaceful mountain cabin way. More like, the whole village is a family of 400, and privacy is a myth, kind of quiet. You hear everything, chickens warming up to lay chaos, toddlers arguing with roosters, and, somewhere far too close, someone practicing the flute badly. Jesus probably woke up to the same soundtrack. As a kid, he lived here, in a house like this, with a rooftop like yours. His family was poor, maybe lower middle class if Joseph had a good season. Carpentry back then wasn't just woodwork, it included stonework, general labor, and any building job no one else wanted to do. There's a decent chance Jesus helped carry bricks up to rooftops long before he preached from hillsides. You slide to the edge of the roof and peer down. Below, someone's mixing clay. Not for fun. Roofs like this need constant maintenance. Every rainstorm, or rather, the rare rainstorms, wash away the plaster sealing the roof. That means someone, usually the youngest or least cranky adult, has to go up with straw, mud, and sweat to fix it. Today, that's Joseph. You watch as he patches a crack near a corner of the roof, muttering about cracks that weren't there yesterday. He's using a simple tool, a flat piece of wood and a leather pouch of water. The mixture is surprisingly thick, like peanut butter made from disappointment. It has to be slapped into place and smoothed out before the sun bakes it dry. If it rains before it sets, well, enjoy your leaky ceiling and impromptu indoor pool. Back then, families often shared roofs. Not literally the same space, but adjoining roofs, kind of like big terraced patios. You could walk from one end of the block to the other just by hopping rooftops. Kids used it like a playground. Adults used it like a neighborhood watchtower. And, occasionally, someone used it to avoid seeing their in-laws downstairs. One interesting feature. Roof storage. People stored tools, herbs, even drying laundry up here. Sometimes you'd find clay pots full of olives, grapes left to sun-dry, or stacks of firewood waiting for winter, when the breeze was less, refreshing, and more, my ears are icicles. And let's talk about sleeping arrangements. No one had their own room unless you were royalty. You didn't even have your own mat most of the time. Everyone slept where there was space. That's why rooftops became so important. Teens and grown sons especially favored them for a little separation. If your family had more than one teenage boy, you'd pray for extra rooftop space. Sometimes you'd even see a small rooftop structure, almost like a hut or lean-to, built from palm branches, linen, or old animal skins. These were common during Sukkot, the Feast of Booths, when families slept outdoors to remember the wilderness years. But a lot of folks just kept their booth year-round for shade, naps, or dramatic exits from dinner. Here's a quirky twist: it wasn't just Judeans who used rooftops. Greeks and Romans living in Judea adopted the custom too. Nothing bonds people faster than communal suffering under the same blazing sun, but this lifestyle had its risks. Flat roofs meant rain pooled unless you carefully sloped the surface or added drains, which rarely worked well. It also meant if you didn't build a parapet wall, someone was going to fall. Probably a cousin named Eli. There's always an Eli. Historians still debate whether roof culture influenced how public life unfolded in Judea. Did open-air living shape public discourse? Did shouting from rooftops help develop a more communal, vocal society? Or was it just the only place not full of chickens? Opinions vary. Back in Nazareth, the sun has finally begun its slow crawl over the hills. The wind shifts. You smell olives, damp wool, and whatever that neighbor is cooking that smells suspiciously like burnt barley. Again, that a young Jesus clambers up the side steps, carrying a rough plank for Joseph. He's lanky, maybe 12, and has the look of someone who would rather be anywhere else. Still, he listens. Joseph shows him how to press the mud down, smooth it with water, and watch for tiny cracks that could cause big leaks. It's not glamorous work. But it's the kind that keeps people dry, safe, and alive. You sit there watching them, a quiet moment between father and son, no miracles, no sermons, just the grind of real life. You imagine Jesus laying his head down that night on the same spot he repaired, listening to the same wind brushing through fig leaves nearby, and suddenly, the rooftop doesn't feel so boring anymore. It feels sacred, in its own quiet, sleepy way. The sun is fully awake now, and so are the village roosters, arguing, as always, about who gets to crow the loudest. You're still on the rooftop, stretching like a lazy cat, blinking against the morning glare. Below, the world stirs in dusty hues of ochre and sun-bleached linen. And today, your rooftop takes on a new role, construction site, because let's be honest, ancient Judean roofs didn't maintain themselves. That gentle breeze you fell asleep to? It's not so gentle during storm season. Clay cracks. Reeds split. And if your rooftop so much as breathes wrong, your ceiling leaks like a Roman tax collector's sieve. Joseph knows this. He's already down in the courtyard, muttering about broken beams and where in the world his hammer went. You get the feeling this isn't the first time he's lost it. Spoiler alert, it's on the roof. Again, you lean over to help as Jesus, now a lanky teenager with strong arms and permanent dirt under his fingernails, hauls up a fresh bundle of thatch. He doesn't complain. Not because he loves roofing, but because in Nazareth, complaining doesn't stop the sun from rising or the rain from seeping through your ceiling. Flat roofs back then were layered like a dusty lasagna. First, wooden beams laid across the walls, usually from local trees like sycamore or olive, which, let's be honest, weren't exactly Home Depot quality. Over those went branches or reeds, maybe palm fronds. Then came a thick mud plaster, clay mixed with straw, goat hair, or anything fibrous that would bind. Think adobe with trust issues, and then, if you were feeling fancy, you might top it with a layer of lime plaster to repel water. Not many could afford that, so most families just hoped their clay would hold up long enough to sleep through the next drizzle without waking in a puddle. Jesus crouches beside Joseph, smoothing a layer of new clay with a flat board. The sun beats down. It's not glamorous work, but there's a quiet rhythm to it: press, smooth, water, repeat. You help tamp down the edges, your hands sticky with warm mud and bits of straw that somehow end up in your eyebrows, and here's a thought: Jesus probably spent more time on rooftops fixing holes than he ever did preaching from them. It's one of those small, strange truths history tends to overlook. Now, as they work, you hear voices rising from other rooftops. One woman is shouting to her sister across the street, something about whether lentils are cursed because her stew won't cook right. A child runs back and forth along a connecting rooftop, arms out like wings. And someone nearby has started singing, badly, but passionately. Rooftop life is many things. Quiet is not one of them. You glance down at the courtyard again. A neighbor carries up a small ceramic amphora, probably filled with olive oil. Why? Because rooftops doubled as pantries. The higher the storage, the safer it was from rodents, nosy toddlers, or your uncle who just wanted a taste. Then there's the ladder issue. Every home has at least one wooden ladder, handmade, wobbly, and deeply untrustworthy. You've climbed it 5 times today and you're pretty sure one rung is going to betray you soon. But it's either that or shimmy up the side wall like a lizard, and honestly, you're not that desperate for sun-dried figs. Quirky fact: some wealthier households had exterior staircases instead of ladders, status symbols disguised as safety features. Nothing said, "I've made it," like not needing to climb a ladder to your own bed. As the morning goes on, you pause to admire your work, or at least, what you haven't accidentally made worse. The new patch gleams slightly in the sunlight, smooth and firm. Jesus stands beside you, wiping sweat from his brow with a bit of linen. He smiles faintly, the kind of smile that says, "We'll be back up here next week when it cracks again." You sit down on a dry corner of the roof and pull off your sandals. Rooftop floors get hot fast. And honestly, Judean sandals were barely shoes, just a leather sole with straps, offering the same protection as a paper towel taped to your foot. You sip from a clay cup of lukewarm water flavored faintly with thyme. It's refreshing, kind of. Hydration's hydration. Beside you, Joseph mutters something about the Roman census and how every carpenter in the region has been stretched thin ever since. More people means more homes. More homes mean more rooftops. And more rooftops mean more repair work for someone who'd really rather be napping. Historians still argue whether Jesus' family home was a freestanding house or part of a family compound, where relatives lived in attached units, sharing rooftops like a communal living maze. Some scholars suggest Jesus grew up with cousins next door, aunts who judged his sandals, and uncles who borrowed tools they never returned. And here's a strange detail most folks miss: rooftops were also political. During the occasional village meeting, or rebellion planning session, rooftops offered private-ish space for quiet talks away from Roman ears. No one suspects the roof guy is plotting sedition while patching a beam. You lie back on the cool mud, arms behind your head. Pigeons flutter overhead, some wild, some likely raised in rooftop coops. Their cooing mixes with the hum of bees from a rooftop herb garden nearby. You half expect a neighbor to lean over and ask if you've seen their chicken. You haven't. Yet, the sky is a deeper blue now, and the clay under you begins to dry, warming like a sun-baked cushion. You feel the rough texture, smell the earthy mix of straw and dust, and hear the village around you easing into the day's rhythm. It's not exciting. It's not dramatic. But it's real. This is where Jesus lived. Where he grew. Where he learned, not just scripture and prayer, but how to fix broken things with tired hands and stubborn clay. And maybe, in some quiet way, that's exactly what prepared him for the world to come. You're lying flat on your back, feeling the ridged imprint of dried mud through your mat, when a donkey below decides it's had enough of everything. It brays loud enough to shake the olives off the tree. You sigh, shift to one side, and catch a whiff of something oddly sweet, figs, maybe. Or fermented goat milk. Hard to say, this morning feels slower, sleepier. You're not expected to do much, except not fall off the edge. So you lie there, watching a beetle work its way across the roof like it's got somewhere important to be. Below, in the heart of the home, the oven has been fired. Someone's baking flatbread. The smoke rises gently through a crack in the roofing clay. You inhale it deeply. Breakfast isn't served at a specific time in Judea, meals happen when the work allows for it. But flatbread and olives? Always a safe bet. You hear Jesus' voice down below. He's talking to a neighbor about the cracked water jug they brought by yesterday. Jesus, by now in his late teens, is trusted to take jobs on his own. It's a small repair, one of those odd side gigs carpenters often picked up. Carpenter didn't mean just woodworker. It meant builder, fixer, mender. Roofs, carts, chairs, walls, you name it, and roofs, ironically, often needed fixing after big social events. See, in Judean life, rooftops weren't just for sleeping. They were your family room, your guest lounge, your open-air cafe. Meals were eaten there when the weather was good, which, thankfully, was most of the year. At night, someone might play a flute, tell a story, or recite Torah by memory under the stars, but rooftops were also where things got, let's say, lively. Weddings, for example, spilled onto the roofs. Neighbors crammed together, wine flowed, people danced until someone's sandal flew off the edge and smacked a goat. The line between celebration and minor chaos was paper-thin, and funerals. Same space. Mourners would gather on the rooftop, wailing in that raw, grief-soaked way unique to the ancient Near East. A good lament wasn't quiet. It was thunderous. You wept, you screamed, you tore your robe dramatically. Rooftops offered a place to express grief to the sky itself. As you stretch, you notice a woman 2 rooftops over, likely an aunt, beating a rug with such vengeance that you start to feel sorry for the rug. Dust explodes from it in puffs, drifting over like sleepy little clouds. Household chores were often done up here, laundry dried on ropes, grains were sifted, and pots were stored in precarious stacks that dared gravity to try something. There's also a tiny shrine in the corner of one neighbor's roof. Just a few stones, arranged carefully around a single oil lamp. Some Judeans kept these small devotional spots for prayer or reflection. Not flashy. Just, sacred in a quiet, rooftop kind of way. You pick at a patch of dried clay near your mat and find an embedded olive pit. Classic. Every rooftop bears the traces of what came before: meals, repairs, arguments, quiet moments. These aren't pristine terraces. They're layered with life. Here's something peculiar: ancient rooftop laws. Yes, there were rules. In Deuteronomy, you were actually commanded to build a parapet, a short wall, around your roof. So you don't bring blood upon your house, it says, because apparently falling off a roof wasn't considered a personal fail, it was the homeowner's fault. So every responsible builder added a parapet, which doubled as a nice backrest if you were up there lounging with a cup of pomegranate wine. Still, accidents happened. Historians still argue whether parapets were always enforced or just strongly suggested. Some archaeological digs show evidence of full-height walls. Others? Just a lip of clay and prayer. You wonder now if Jesus, as a carpenter, ever got called in to build those safety features. Maybe he helped prevent more than one Eli from plummeting into a pile of goats. You hear sandals on the ladder. It's Mary, Jesus' mother, bringing up a folded cloth and a basket of dates. She sets them down with that quiet grace of someone who's done this 1,000 times. She pauses, looks at the sky, then at the distant hills, her face unreadable. Then she disappears back down the ladder, already thinking about her next task. You chew on a date, soft, syrupy, full of little crunchy seeds. Probably the most decadent thing you'll eat all day. Nearby, someone begins reading aloud from memory, words from the Psalms, delivered slowly, reverently. Rooftops were learning spaces too. Children recited scripture under the stars, fathers told family stories, and traveling teachers held small lessons for eager listeners. Point 1 Fun fringe theory. Some scholars suggest Jesus may have done early teachings from rooftops before ever gathering a crowd in Galilee. Imagine a teenage Jesus preaching about kindness and truth while his cousin tries to wrestle a chicken behind him. It's not canonical, but it's delightfully human. The wind picks up a little, rustling the old fabric that stretched across part of the roof for shade. You tuck your blanket tighter, not because it's cold, but because it feels like a gentle anchor to the moment, and somewhere in the distance, a shout, someone calling for help with another rooftop repair. Seems that corner beam didn't hold up after last week's feast. Jesus grabs his tools and calls to you to come along, because guess what? You're part of the repair crew now. You stand slowly, stretch again, and brush clay dust off your robe. It doesn't help. Everything up here leaves a mark. But as you follow Jesus across the rooftops, stepping carefully, balancing tools, laughing a little when your foot catches a loose reed, you realize, this is the pace of life. This is what shaped him, not just the scriptures and the prayers, but the daily rituals of clay and sweat, neighbors and noise, mistakes and mending. The rooftop isn't just where people slept. It's where they became who they were. You're making your way across rooftops now, stepping carefully, ducking under laundry lines, and trying not to trip over a snoozing cat that's perfectly blended into the sun-warmed clay. Jesus leads the way, a bundle of tools slung over one shoulder, his tunic dusty at the hem, his expression somewhere between focused and amused. The repair call came from Ezra's house. He's elderly, mostly blind in one eye, and famous for falling asleep mid-sentence. His rooftop has a soft spot the size of a sleeping mat, and last night's drizzle turned it into something between a sponge and a sinkhole. You step around it cautiously, watching Jesus drop to one knee to inspect the damage. As he gently presses the clay with a calloused thumb, he nods slowly, then glances at you. "It's bad," he says dryly. "Not quite fall through into a pot of stew bad, but close." Roof maintenance is, at this point, almost a community service. Because in small towns like Nazareth, rooftops were social property. Everyone saw everyone else's. Privacy was more suggestion than reality. And when one roof gave way, you weren't just fixing clay, you were preserving the neighborhood's entire system of quiet, elevated life. You start handing Jesus tools from the bundle, a wooden float for smoothing clay, a jagged knife for trimming reeds, and a gourd of water to keep the mix pliable. The two of you get to work with a rhythm that's almost meditative. Press, pat, spread, repeat. Ezra watches from the shade, offering occasional advice that may or may not be relevant to this century, and as you work, you hear the buzz of morning life. A woman grinding barley in a rooftop corner. Children giggling as they chase each other with sticks, definitely not safe, but wildly entertaining. The faint clink of a coin jar being opened. Someone selling something, probably overpriced honey again. This patch job is a little more complicated because the supporting beam beneath the soft clay has shifted. Jesus rolls up his sleeves and begins loosening the mud around it, muttering something about needing a stronger olive wood slat. You hold one side steady while he wedges the new beam in place, fingers nimble, movements patient. You glance up. The view from Ezra's roof stretches farther than you realized, down over the olive groves, out toward the dusty road that leads to Sepphoris, and just beyond, the shimmer of distant hills. You remember, historians still argue whether Jesus ever worked in Sepphoris, the nearby city undergoing major construction during his teenage years. Some believe he walked there regularly, picking up big city building skills to bring home. Others think his work stayed local. Either way, rooftops like Ezra's benefited from whatever he learned. The quirky bit? Some rooftops had secret storage spaces. Not trapdoors, exactly, but areas between the beams where dried goods, family treasures, or emergency coin stashes were tucked away. Jesus gently lifts a loose tile and finds exactly that, a small pouch, heavy with dried figs and, surprisingly, a copper ring. Ezra squints at it, then chuckles. "My wedding band. Thought the pigeons stole it." You smile, mostly because pigeons here are capable of anything. Especially the one currently eyeing your basket of tools like it's planning a heist. As the patch begins to dry, you help layer on the finishing coat, a mixture of clay, straw, and just enough goat hair to give it that ancient insulation texture. Jesus smooths it with a practiced hand. Not a crack remains. The job's not glamorous, but it's good. Quietly good. And Ezra, now half asleep in his corner, murmurs a thank you you're pretty sure is also directed at a nearby broom. You both sit for a moment, letting the sun soak your backs. Jesus offers you a piece of flatbread from his satchel, slightly worn, slightly bent, and absolutely perfect. You eat in companionable silence, and then he does something unexpected. He stands, moves a few paces away to the edge of the roof, and just watches. Below, the road carries a slow stream of life, travelers with baskets, animals kicking up dust, children running barefoot and wild. Jesus doesn't say a word. Just watches. You realize, this might be where he thinks best. High above the crowd. Not to escape it, but to understand it better. A rooftop is both separation and connection. It's solitude with a view. And maybe, just maybe, this is where his sense of people came from, by watching them live their dusty, noisy, glorious lives from above, and suddenly you remember that one gospel scene, years from now, when friends of a paralyzed man dig through a rooftop to lower him to Jesus. That moment makes sense now. Because these rooftops, they're not sturdy fortresses. They're layered with compassion and clay. With enough effort, enough desperation, you could dig through one. You could tear away the roof to reach hope. Another scholarly debate rises in your memory. Did that moment happen in a home like this one? In a town like Nazareth? The Gospels say Capernaum, but scholars debate the logistics. How big was the house? How thick the roof? Who fixed it afterward? You and Jesus. Maybe. You smile, imagining patching up a hole where a miracle happened. That would be something. Back in the present, Jesus finally turns from the view and sits again. He says something about needing more clay from the riverbed. You nod, already bracing for another hike, another bucket, another climb. The day isn't over. The rooftop life never really is, but before you leave, you look around one last time, and this moment lingers. A half-dry patch of roof, a sleepy old man, a young carpenter with clay-streaked arms, and you, sitting quietly on a slab of ancient mud that somehow connects the earth to heaven. The river is cooler than you expected, its shallow waters swirling around your ankles as you gather fresh clay. You cup handfuls, feeling the slick mud slip through your fingers, cool and sticky, smelling faintly of earth and distant rain. This riverbank was a lifeline, where the village came to refill water jars, wash clothes, and, today, collect the raw material for repairing roofs. Jesus wades in beside you, sleeves rolled up, the faint glint of sun on his hair. He jokes about the mud's consistency, comparing it to a less appetizing stew, and you laugh. It's the kind of humor that lightens hard work and makes the day seem less like a chore and more like an adventure. But, of course, this is no vacation. The clay you're gathering will become a vital barrier against wind and rain. Rooftop clay wasn't just any mud. It needed to be just right, rich enough in fine particles to stick but not so watery that it would crack and crumble. Mixed with straw or goat hair, this combination hardened into a surprisingly resilient shell that protected homes through dry summers and sudden downpours. You carry the heavy clay back to the house in a rough basket made from woven palm leaves. It's awkward, and you almost drop it once, narrowly saving the precious load. Jesus shakes his head with a smile, silently teasing your lack of grace. Back on the rooftop, you join Joseph again. The three of you work side by side, layering the fresh clay carefully over the patched beams. Joseph tells stories of his own youth, when carpentry was less about fixing roofs and more about building furniture fit for a palace. He dreams out loud of what it would be like to build something permanent, something that lasts. That dream seems strange here, on rooftops that always need mending. But it's a dream you share. Because this life, as tough and unpredictable as it is, always has room for hope. You pause, watching as Jesus smooths the clay with a flat wooden board, working it gently to seal every crack and crevice. There's a quiet patience in his movements, deliberate, careful, as if every patch he lays is a small act of care for the world. That it reminds you of something scholars often debate: was Jesus just a skilled carpenter, or did his work carry a deeper meaning? Some suggest his hands were not only building roofs and furniture but crafting a metaphor for restoration, for healing a broken world. Others think that's reading too much into it. Regardless, the symbolism sticks with you. repairing what's broken, sealing what's fragile, building shelter against storms. The work slows as afternoon stretches on. You lean back against the low parapet, feeling the warm clay drying beneath your hands. Pigeons flutter nearby, their cooing blending with distant conversations and the clatter of pottery. You reach into your satchel for a fig, sweet and sticky, and offer one to Jesus, who accepts it with a quiet nod. There's no need for many words here. The work, the sun, and the shared silence say everything. As the sun begins to lower, the village quiets. People retreat indoors, rooftops empty out. Only the faint glow of oil lamps flickers against the gathering dusk. You stand at the edge, looking out over a landscape that's both ordinary and extraordinary: dusty hills, olive trees, the distant silhouette of the city. Tonight, you'll sleep on the very rooftop you just repaired. You imagine the cool night air brushing your face, the soft rustle of stars overhead, and the gentle sense of safety that comes from knowing your home can withstand whatever comes next. And as you lie down, you realize that these simple rooftops, with their clay and straw, ladders and parapets, are more than just shelter. They're the heartbeat of everyday life, the place where families live, love, grieve, and dream. Here, you feel connected to something timeless, a story woven through centuries of sun and dust, work and rest, human hands and quiet faith. The night wraps around you like a soft blanket as you settle onto the rooftop, the clay beneath your mat still warm from the day's sun. You feel the subtle slope beneath you, the gentle rise and fall of the earth far below, and the distant hum of village life winding down. Somewhere nearby, a child's quiet sob is swallowed by the night air, and a dog's bark echoes faintly, small, familiar sounds that stitch together the fabric of this ancient world. Stars begin to blink awake, tiny pinpricks of cold fire against the vast, velvet sky. The constellations look just as they must have to the first Judeans, guiding shepherds and travelers across hills and deserts, offering a quiet sense of order in a world that's often anything but. You lay your head back and let your thoughts drift, wondering what it was like for Jesus to spend countless nights on these rooftops, staring up at the same stars, the same endless sky. Historians still argue whether rooftop sleeping was purely practical, escaping the heat and pests of ground level, or also deeply symbolic, a gesture of closeness to heaven, of openness to divine inspiration. Your fingers trace the rough clay beneath you. It's strange to think that these rooftops weren't designed for comfort. They weren't padded or warm like a bed. They were hard, dusty, sometimes cold. You probably wouldn't survive the first night without some serious adaptability, and maybe a little luck. But here, you are, part of a tradition stretching back generations. A breeze stirs the laundry lines overhead, the fabric whispering softly like a lullaby. You catch a faint scent of burning olive oil from a nearby lamp, the rich aroma mingling with the cool night air. These sensory details, simple, everyday, seem to hold a kind of sacredness. Suddenly, a shadow moves near the parapet. It's Mary, carrying a small jug of water and a folded cloth. She sets them down beside you with quiet care, her presence a balm against the night's chill. You remember stories about her faith, her steadfastness through uncertainty and pain. Here she is now, still, silent, part of this living, breathing history. You wonder how often she joined the family on these rooftops, sharing quiet conversations or prayers under the stars. The rooftop was more than a place to sleep, it was a space for connection and reflection. You think of the rooftop scenes in the Gospels, Jesus teaching, friends lowering a paralytic through the roof, moments of healing and revelation. Each one a thread in a tapestry woven high above the ground, where heaven and earth seemed to meet. One quirky tidbit you recall: some rooftop parapets were deliberately low in certain houses, allowing for easier escape during raids or quick conversations with neighbors below, though this was controversial, since safety was paramount. The balance between protection and accessibility was something builders and families negotiated daily. As you close your eyes, the sounds of the night, the gentle breeze, the distant murmur of voices, the occasional hoot of an owl, blend into a soothing symphony. Your breathing slows, the day's dust and toil fading away, sleep creeps in gently, carrying you into dreams shaped by clay and stars, by rooftops and whispered prayers. The midday sun settles lazily above you, painting the Judean high. Jesus walks just ahead, his robe brushing against the path's dusty edge. He's quiet now, but there's a weight to the silence, not heavy or cold, but full, like it knows something the rest of the world hasn't caught up to yet. You feel it, too, that subtle pull of purpose, the sin you pass by a house with vines curling up its wall, grapes just starting to bulge with juice, still firm and green. A boy watches from the rooftop, lying on his stomach with his chin resting in his hands. His family is likely inside preparing the day's meal. The rooftop is his quiet space, a vantage point, a playground, maybe even a hiding place when chores call his name. You wave. He doesn't wave back, just stares, curious and slightly unsure of the group walking by. Jesus glances up and gives a nod. He knows. He's seen enough rooftops in his time to understand what they mean to a family in this region. See, sleeping on rooftops wasn't some quirky cultural trend, it was survival mixed with common sense. Judean homes were often built from mud, brick or stone, with flat roofs supported by wooden beams and packed earth. The air inside these small homes could grow thick and sweltering, especially during summer nights when the desert heat refused to let go. So when the day's heat lingered into the night, families climbed ladders to the rooftop, spread out woven mats, and let the open air cradle them to sleep. It wasn't just practical. There was something beautifully symbolic about it, lying under the stars, trusting the heavens to hold you safely until morning. It was a quiet vulnerability. And as you lie there, the open sky above you, the hum of crickets lulling your thoughts, you begin to understand why it became more than just a place to sleep. It became a sanctuary. Some scholars argue that the rooftop was the heart of the household. Sure, the hearth was inside, and the courtyard was bustling with daily chores, but the roof? That's where prayers drifted upward. That's where secrets were whispered between siblings and where songs were sung softly before sleep. It's also where messages were shouted, loud and proud. Remember how Jesus said, "What I tell you in the dark, speak in the daylight, what is whispered in your ear, proclaim from the rooftops." He wasn't just being poetic. In Judean villages, the rooftop was the broadcast booth. You shouted from there because everyone could hear you, neighbors, passers-by, the marketplace crowd half a block away. The acoustics? Honestly not bad for first-century urban design. As you trail behind Jesus now, the smell of bread wafts from an open window. It's not fancy bread, just barley, maybe wheat if they've had a lucky season. You imagine someone inside pressing it flat with calloused hands, brow damp with effort, eyes trained on the family's next meal. Bread wasn't just food, it was life, prayer, and rhythm all kneaded into one. You think about the rooftops again. About the quiet moment that comes just after sundown, when a breeze finally creeps in and families sit together under the sky. Fathers might retell stories of Moses or David. Mothers would hush little ones to sleep with old lullabies, passed down through generations. The stars above weren't abstract, they were memory maps. "There's the one Abraham counted," someone might whisper. "That one there, that's the same sky Ruth slept under after gleaning barley." And then, of course, there was that time King David didn't use his rooftop to sleep. You know the one, he saw Bathsheba from there. One of those moments history won't let go, and rightly so. Because rooftops, like anything sacred, could be misused. They were places of rest, yes, but also vantage points. Platforms for reflection, prayer, and sometimes, unfortunately, for temptation and control. Jesus stops walking now and looks up at the sky, not at anything in particular. Sometimes, the highest places, he murmurs, are where the heart reveals what it truly longs for. His voice is gentle, but the weight of it stays with you long after the words are gone. In the distance, someone begins to sing. It's soft, nearly lost in the breeze, but unmistakably a lullaby. You don't know the words, but the melody feels ancient. Maybe it's the same tune Mary once hummed to Jesus as a child. Maybe not. But in this moment, it doesn't really matter. Everything slows. The world softens. And for just a moment, as the rooftops fade behind you and the sky deepens its blue, you feel like you understand something unspoken. That history isn't always loud. Sometimes it's as quiet as a family falling asleep under the stars, on a roof built by hand, in a town time forgot but memory never did. Your footsteps slow as you reach a low rise in the land, and from here you can see it, a mosaic of rooftops spread out across the valley like parchment laid flat. Some are cluttered with clay pots, drying laundry, baskets left out to catch the breeze. Others are empty, bare save for the occasional bundle of firewood or a small sleeping mat rolled up in the corner. Even from a distance, you can spot which families use their roofs regularly. There are signs, worn paths in the dust, small ledges built up to block wind, or palm fronds laid out for shade. You notice one roof with what looks like a few herbs growing in broken pots. Someone up there is trying to coax basil and hyssop out of sunbaked soil, a quiet kind of optimism in the face of relentless heat. Jesus pauses beside you, taking in the scene. Each of those rooftops, he says, holds 1,000 stories. His words are simple, but they echo. You know he's right that in fact, some stories begin and end up there. Take, for example, a wedding night. In smaller villages where space was tight and homes were shared between generations, the rooftop was sometimes the only private space a young couple could find. So under the stars, blushing and nervous and full of hope, they begin their life together. It wasn't romantic in the modern, candlelit dinner sense, but it was real. And in many ways, more honest. You couldn't hide much under an open sky, and then there's the opposite side of life. Sometimes, when grief visited a household, the rooftop became a space of mourning. People would tear their clothes and sit in silence, dusting their heads with ash while looking out toward the hills, maybe hoping for a sign, or just a breeze to ease the pain. You can still feel that sorrow in the bones of the city. It's faint, but it lingers. A cool wind picks up now, curling around your ankles, and you follow Jesus down a narrow slope into a quieter part of the village. Here, the walls are older, the stones worn smooth by generations of touch. You see a woman carrying a clay jar on her head, perfectly balanced, as she climbs a ladder to her roof. Maybe she's storing oil, or maybe she's heading up for evening prayers. Either way, the motion is graceful and practiced. You realize, rooftops weren't just a place to sleep. They were part of the home's daily rhythm. People dried fruit there, stored tools, or retreated for a moment of quiet when life below grew loud. Kids played there in the afternoon sun, careful not to roll their toys off the edge. Even arguments sometimes took place up top, because let's be honest, when tempers flared and the walls downstairs grew too tight, you needed sky above you to let the steam out. Jesus smiles as he watches the woman ascend. They've always looked up to pray, he murmurs. It's easier to hope when there's no ceiling. That thought stays with you as you turn the corner into a busier stretch of homes. Two men are repairing a roof, pulling up a section of packed earth and branches to replace it. It's backbreaking work. Mud, straw, and wood don't last forever, especially not through the rainy season. Maintenance is constant. You wonder how many calloused hands it takes to keep a single roof intact. Suddenly, you remember another rooftop story, one with friends, a crowd, and a man lowered through the ceiling. You glance at Jesus, wondering if he's thinking of it too. That chaotic scene, four friends determined to bring their paralyzed companion to Jesus, but the house was too full, packed with people pressed wall to wall. So they climbed the outer stairs, tore through the roof, and lowered him down, right into the middle of it all. Dirt falling, gasps from the crowd, a hole opening in someone's ceiling like divine mischief. Imagine being the homeowner. One moment you're hosting a rabbi, the next your ceilings being unmade like a divine invitation. Some scholars wonder whose house that was. Peter's, maybe. Others argue it doesn't matter. What matters is that someone believed it was worth destroying the roof if it meant healing someone's soul. And Jesus didn't scold them. He didn't say, "Hey, fix that first." He looked at their faith, the desperation, the boldness, and said, "Your sins are forgiven." Then he healed the man. The rooftop became the doorway. That's the kind of detail you can't ignore. Sometimes the place built to keep you out of the weather ends up being your way into grace. Funny how that works. You walk a little further, passing a group of children playing a game with pebbles. They pause to stare at Jesus. He crouches for a moment, picks up one of their stones, and flicks it gently. It skips twice, bounces, and lands right in the circle they've drawn. The kids erupt in laughter. No miracle. No sermon. Just a little joy in a dusty street that as you look up, the rooftops stretch on and on, some gleaming in the sunlight, others dark with age, all of them stitched together by the everyday lives of people trying their best to survive, love, worship, and grow old with some dignity, and beneath that patchwork skyline, you walk, quietly aware that these simple homes and their humble rooftops have seen more raw, honest moments of human life than the grandest palaces ever could. You feel it now. The weight of the ordinary, made holy by attention. By now, the sun has begun its slow descent behind the hills, staining the horizon with hues of apricot and smoke. The shadows of olive trees stretch longer, weaving across the dry paths like slow-moving fingers. And above you, always above you, the rooftops begin to stir with evening life. A boy climbs up with a clay jug, his small feet nimble on the ladder. He's probably fetching something left from the morning, figs or a basket of bread. Or maybe he's just escaping the bustle below for a few last minutes of daylight. There's something sacred about rooftops at dusk. It's like the whole village takes a breath, all at once. You can hear quiet voices murmuring prayers. Somewhere nearby, a mother is humming softly, her tune barely above the chirp of crickets beginning their nightly chorus. And up ahead, on a rooftop partially shaded by an overhanging awning, Jesus has paused. He's watching the sky change colors like it's a scripture being written just for tonight. You climb the steps beside him. The roof is warm under your feet, sun-soaked and gently fading into coolness. The breeze is steady now, enough to rustle the fringe of your tunic and carry the smell of lentils cooking 2 homes down. There's a peace here that feels deliberate, crafted, like someone planned it into the architecture of the evening. Jesus doesn't say much. He simply sits, cross-legged, and looks out over the roofs, and in that silence, your thoughts start to wander, not away, but deeper. Back to the old stories. Remember when Peter had his vision on a rooftop in Joppa? Midday heat, hunger gnawing at his gut, and suddenly, a vision of a sheet descending from heaven, full of animals deemed unclean. A voice telling him to eat. To break a rule. To rethink everything he thought he knew. It happened on a roof. Not in a temple. Not even on a mountain. Just, a roof. A place where sweat meets clay, where dust settles in corners, and where the horizon feels close enough to reach. Historians still debate whether Peter's vision was entirely spiritual or sparked by sunstroke. Seriously, some argue it could have been a mix of divine intervention and midday exhaustion. But either way, what came from it? A radical rethinking of who belonged in the kingdom of God. A shift. A door swinging wide again, the roof becomes a threshold. You lean back, resting on your elbows, and look up. The stars are beginning to blink awake, slowly, shyly, like they're still shaking off daylight. You wonder how many prayers have floated up into those stars. How many whispered hopes, tears, regrets, and hallelujahs have risen from rooftops just like this one. A group of women nearby are lighting small oil lamps. The flames flicker like the first signs of a dream. You watch as they set them along the edge of the roof, one by one. Not for ritual, necessarily, just tradition. Habit. Protection. In some households, those lamps stayed lit all night, like a hush over the rooftop world. You glance at Jesus, and he's watching them too. Light, he says softly, belongs up high. It clicks for you then, a city on a hill cannot be hidden. Not just poetry. It's practical. It's obvious. When you light a lamp and place it on a rooftop, it doesn't just help your family, it guides your neighbor. It tells the wanderer where home is. It reminds the grieving that someone nearby still burns a little flame against the dark. You start to understand why rooftops show up again and again, not just in stories, but in the structure of how these people lived, how they believed. It was always about elevation, not for status, but for clarity. To see. To be seen. To offer something above the noise. Even in exile, the rooftop shows up. Remember Daniel in Babylon? He prayed facing Jerusalem, with his windows open toward the east. Some scholars suggest he did it from an upper room or roof chamber, someplace elevated, exposed. Bold. Dangerous. But again, he went up. Always up. Not to escape, but to stay connected, because the higher you go, the closer you are to heaven. At least, that's how it felt. A shout breaks the quiet, a child's laugh, shrill and full of delight. A father is chasing his son across a rooftop just down the way, playing some ancient version of tag. The mother leans against the wall, arms crossed, a tired smile pulling at her cheeks. She looks like she's had a long day, but this moment. This is the gold inside the dust. Jesus watches them, too, and his face softens. You wonder what memories he holds of his own rooftop moments. Maybe Joseph taught him how to patch a leak. Maybe Mary tucked him in under a blanket of stars and whispered stories about angels and kings and quiet miracles. Maybe he sat alone up here as a teenager, staring out toward Jerusalem, already feeling the pull of destiny tightening in his chest like a knot. Whatever the case, he knows these rooftops. Not just structurally, but intimately. They aren't backdrops to him. They're bookmarks in his story. As night thickens around you, the village begins to settle. Voices grow lower. Flames steady. The last jars are set down. And one by one, families start to lie down on their roofs, blankets unfurled, mats laid out, sandals kicked off into corners. You can hear the hushed sounds of nighttime rituals, prayers mumbled, siblings shushed, tired sighs from men who've worked their bodies to the bone. Someone coughs. A baby whimpers. But underneath it all, there's this slow rhythm, like the entire community is breathing in sync. You lie down, too, arms behind your head, and for a while, say nothing. Above you, the stars are now wide awake. The constellations ancient Judeans used for farming, traveling, storytelling, they're all there. Shimmering testimonies of lives lived long before you ever walked these roads, and it hits you. The rooftop isn't just the top of a house. It's the threshold between worlds, the hard floor of human struggle, and the open ceiling of divine mystery. You close your eyes, and the rooftops whisper. The faint glow of dawn nudges you awake, soft light filtering through the olive branches just beyond the rooftop's edge. You stretch slowly, savoring the gentle stiffness in your muscles, a subtle reminder of yesterday's labor, the rhythm of work and rest woven tightly into this life. The air carries a cool freshness, tinged faintly with the earthy scent of damp clay and crushed herbs. Jesus is already awake, sitting quietly near the parapet, a scroll unfurled beside him. His fingers trace the faded ink lines as if reading the words aloud to the morning breeze. There's a calm concentration in his posture, a serene focus that seems almost at odds with the bustling village waking up below. You wonder how many times he's sat here before, eyes fixed on the ancient texts, wrestling with meanings that ripple far beyond the letters themselves. These scrolls, delicately crafted from stitched animal skins, are precious. To handle one is to hold generations of stories, laws, prayers, and wisdom, carefully preserved like sacred heirlooms. In this time and place, reading wasn't a simple act. It was a ritual, often done aloud, with voice carrying over the rooftops. You remember that in ancient Judea, literacy was not widespread. Many learned to read only to recite scriptures publicly. Scholars and priests debated the best interpretations, and these discussions could be fiery and long-lasting. Historians still argue whether rooftop study sessions were formal gatherings or more spontaneous moments of learning. As you settle beside Jesus, you feel the rough texture of the scroll, the faint smell of aged parchment mingling with the morning air. He points out a passage, words speaking of mercy, humility, and justice. His voice is soft but sure, weaving the ancient text into a living, breathing conversation. The village below is stirring now. Women draw water from the communal well, children scamper across the stones, and the distant bleating of goats punctuates the quiet. The rooftop becomes a classroom without walls, open to the sky and the elements, where faith and daily life entwine. You think about the peculiar design of some rooftops here, built not just for rest but for work, study, and community. Some had small niches built into their thick walls to protect scrolls from sun and sudden rain, little sanctuaries preserving knowledge amid the unpredictability of weather. Jesus pauses, eyes lifting toward the sky, then back to you. These words guide us, he says quietly. Not just as rules, but as a way to live with kindness and courage. A nearby child laughs, chasing a hoop down a lane. It's a timeless sound, innocent and bright, threading through your thoughts like a gentle melody. You feel a strange kinship across centuries, connected by the simplest joys. You notice a slight scar on Jesus's hand, a remnant of carpentry work, yet here he is, blending manual labor with spiritual teaching seamlessly. It's a reminder that learning and living are inseparable in this world. A breeze stirs, carrying the scent of fresh bread baking in ovens nearby, mingling with the warm clay's dry aroma. This rooftop, this moment, feels like a threshold, between the sacred and the everyday, the ancient and the immediate. You imagine scholars and students debating on these very rooftops, voices raised in passionate discussion about law and prophecy. Some say these debates shaped the very future of Judaism and early Christianity. Others suggest they were more localized, quiet exchanges among friends and families. One quirky detail you recall is that some scrolls were written with meticulous care using reed pens dipped in ink made from soot and gum, tools as humble as the rooftops themselves. The process of writing was an art and a devotion, a physical link to the divine. You breathe in deeply, the cool morning air filling your lungs, and feel the steady pulse of life here. The sun climbs higher, and the village below hums with growing energy. The scroll is rolled away gently, and Jesus rises, ready to face the day's demands. Together, you step down from the rooftop, carrying with you the weight and lightness of ancient wisdom, woven into every breath, every moment spent under this open sky. You settle back down beside Jesus, the scroll now carefully rolled and resting beside him like a trusted companion. The village hums with life beneath you, the steady rhythm of feet on stone, the murmur of voices mingling with the occasional bleat of a goat or the sharp bark of a dog. The world feels alive but contained, as if this rooftop is a quiet refuge overlooking the dance of daily life. Jesus picks up a small piece of charcoal and begins to sketch on a flat piece of stone nearby, simple lines and shapes, perhaps a diagram or an illustration of the passage he just read. His movements are deliberate and patient, like the carpenter's precision you saw earlier. You watch the play of sunlight on his face, how shadows lengthen and soften as morning matures into midday. There's a gentle patience here, an acceptance of time's flow that's hard to capture in words. The rooftop itself tells stories if you know how to read it. The worn tiles, some chipped or slightly out of place, speak of years of weather and use. The thick walls beneath your feet hold warmth from the day's sun and release it slowly as the evening cools. Small tufts of wild grass sprout from cracks, a stubborn green against the earth tones. You remember a curious tidbit about these rooftops. Because the climate was mostly dry, they were often designed flat rather than pitched like northern roofs, making them ideal for sleeping, drying grains, or even processing olives during harvest. The communal life here wasn't confined inside but spread upward, into the open air. Nearby, you hear the soft clinking of water jars being filled at a cistern and the laughter of women exchanging gossip while working. The rooftop is a front-row seat to this intimate theater of human connection, offering glimpses into joys, struggles, and simple moments of grace. Historians still debate how common formal education was in small villages. While Jerusalem had established schools and learned scribes, much of the rural teaching likely happened informally, families passing stories and laws down orally, with occasional reading aloud from scrolls. Rooftops may have been perfect spaces for such learning, where light and air mingled freely. Jesus leans back and sighs softly. Learning isn't just about words, he says. It's about living those words in the way we treat each other, in the way we build our lives. You nod, sensing the depth beneath his simple statement. There's an unspoken understanding here, that knowledge is never static but a living, breathing thing that grows with action and reflection. That a sudden breeze stirs, carrying the faint scent of wild thyme and baking bread, mingled with the dust of the narrow streets below. It's a reminder that life is both fragile and enduring, caught between earth and sky. You glance again at the scroll, wondering about the hands that wrote it, the prayers whispered over its creation, the countless eyes that have traced its lines through centuries. The midday sun climbs higher, urging you both to seek shade. You rise slowly, feeling the steady pulse of life here, simple, complex, eternal. As you step down from the rooftop, the world unfolds before you, a tapestry woven from faith, labor, community, and hope. As you descend from the rooftop, the village noise grows louder, the sound of a donkey's bray, children's chatter, and the rhythmic pounding of a woman grinding grain. The warmth of the sun presses gently against your skin, a reminder that this land has felt countless dawns, just like this one. Jesus walks beside you, his steps measured and calm. You think about how teaching and carpentry blend seamlessly in his life. He uses his hands to build and his words to shape hearts. Both crafts require patience, care, and an understanding of the material, whether wood or human spirit. You pause near a small market stall where merchants display pottery, woven baskets, and colorful spices. The vibrant smells mix with the dusty air, an intoxicating blend of everyday life. These sights and scents ground you, reminding you that even the grandest ideas begin in the humblest settings. You recall one quirky fact: some ancient Judean families kept small rooftop gardens, using shallow soil beds to grow herbs like mint, dill, and rue. These gardens provided fresh flavors for cooking and medicinal plants for healing. It's a charming thought, people cultivating green life above the dusty streets, a touch of Eden amid the mundane. Historians still argue how widespread such rooftop gardens were. Were they a luxury for wealthier families or a common feature even in modest homes? Either way, they add a layer of life and color to the rooftops where you've spent these quiet hours. The midday sun now blazes fully overhead. You find a shaded courtyard where Jesus pauses to greet a few familiar faces, sharing quiet words and smiles. The warmth of community here is palpable, a network of support and belonging. You realize how much of this life is woven through simple human connection, shared meals, exchanged stories, and moments of teaching like the one on the rooftop. It's a rhythm that pulses beneath the surface of history. As the afternoon wanes, you think back to the scroll, the rooftop, the soft breeze, and the echoes of children's laughter. These small details build a vivid mosaic of a life lived with purpose and grace. You glance once more at Jesus, his eyes calm and full of quiet strength. Every day holds a lesson, he says softly. And every rooftop is a classroom. With that, you prepare to move forward into the next chapter of this ancient journey, carrying with you the lessons learned above the village rooftops. The sun has dipped lower now, casting a golden haze over the rolling hills surrounding the village. You walk alongside Jesus toward the outskirts, where olive groves stretch like a vast sea of silvery leaves shimmering in the evening light. The air smells faintly of earth and resin, a quiet contrast to the dust and noise of the town. Jesus pauses beside an ancient olive tree, its gnarled trunk twisted by centuries of wind and sun. He runs his hand over the bark, as if drawing strength and wisdom from its rugged form. You can almost feel the weight of history held in that living wood, a symbol of peace, endurance, and resilience in this dry land. The olive harvest was a crucial time here, a blend of labor, celebration, and tradition. Families gathered to pick the ripe fruit, often singing and telling stories as they worked. The process itself was a carefully choreographed dance, shaking branches, collecting olives in woven baskets, and pressing them into oil that would light lamps, flavor meals, and anoint kings and prophets. You remember that olive trees could live for hundreds, sometimes even thousands of years, their roots running deep and their branches reaching wide, a fitting metaphor for the faith and culture that had taken root in this land. While you watch, a group of villagers begin sorting olives, tossing out those damaged by pests or sun. The work is tedious but sacred, part of a cycle that connects generations past, present, and future. Some scholars still debate the exact methods used to press olives during Jesus' time, whether large stone mills or smaller hand presses predominated, but the importance of olive oil in daily life is unquestioned. You join Jesus as he leads a small group in a prayer of thanksgiving, voices rising softly in the fading light. The words are simple but profound, a plea for blessings on the harvest and the people who toil beneath the open sky. Nearby, children play tag among the trees, their laughter a bright thread woven into the peaceful evening tapestry. You smile, knowing that while the toil is real, so too is joy. Even in the humblest corners of the world, the sun sinks lower still, painting the sky with hues of orange and purple. Shadows stretch long across the fields, and the first stars begin to twinkle faintly overhead. The olive grove, the prayers, and the laughter all blend into a quiet symphony of life unfolding at the edge of the ancient village. You feel a deep calm settling over you, a gentle reminder that amid history's grand narratives, it's these simple moments that echo most enduringly in the heart. As twilight deepens, you find yourself drawn to the stories Jesus begins to share, stories rooted in these very olive groves and fields, tales passed down through generations but newly alive in his voice. He speaks of prophets who wandered these lands, of kings anointed with oil from these trees, and of a vision for a world where peace would flow like a gentle stream. You imagine the landscape as it was then, rugged hills dotted with small farms, villages huddled together for protection, and a steady pulse of life tied to the cycles of the earth. These fields were more than just places of work, they were living symbols, sacred ground where nature and spirit intertwined. Historians still argue about the extent to which agricultural metaphors shaped Jesus' teaching. Some say his frequent references to seeds, vineyards, and harvests were deliberate tools to connect with his audience's daily realities, while others suggest deeper, mystical meanings layered beneath the surface. Whatever the case, the imagery lingers, vivid and grounding. You notice a small cluster of wildflowers near the olive trees, delicate blossoms that seem to glow faintly in the fading light. They remind you that beauty often thrives quietly alongside labor and hardship, a soft counterpoint to the ruggedness of the land. Nearby, a shepherd leads his flock home, their soft bleating blending with the whisper of leaves. The simple scene feels timeless, a snapshot of life continuing unbroken through centuries. Jesus turns to you with a gentle smile. "These olives teach patience," he says. "They grow slowly, season after season, just as we grow in faith and understanding. There is no rush." You reflect on that, a lesson as relevant now as it was then. Growth, whether of trees, people, or spirit, unfolds in its own time, shaped by sun and rain, struggle and rest. As night falls fully, the stars sparkle brighter, and a cool breeze stirs the branches overhead. You feel a deep peace settle over the grove, a quiet invitation to rest, to dream, and to listen for the soft whispers of ancient wisdom carried on the wind. With the olive trees standing sentinel around you, you prepare to leave this sacred place behind, carrying with you the calm strength of centuries, the promise of patience, and the gentle rhythm of life under the wide, eternal sky. You step back into the quiet night, the cool air brushing softly against your skin. The stars above are brighter now, sprinkled across the velvet sky like scattered diamonds. There's a peacefulness in this moment, a pause in time where the noise of the day gives way to reflection and calm. Walking through the village streets, you notice how shadows play on the uneven stone walls. The flicker of distant lamps reveals small details, a cat curled up on a doorstep, a child's sandals left by the entrance, a vine creeping up a wall, its leaves shimmering faintly under the moonlight. You think about the people here, ordinary folks with extraordinary stories etched into their lives. Their hopes, fears, dreams, and struggles all intertwined in the simple act of gathering together under the same roof. Jesus' voice echoes gently in your mind. Faith grows in community, just as the smallest seed becomes the tallest tree with time and care. It's a reminder that no journey is taken alone, and that the connections we nurture shape the path ahead. You remember the scholarly debates about the extent of communal worship versus individual practice in ancient Judea. Some argue that synagogue services and temple rituals dominated, while others point to the importance of home-based gatherings like this one. Whatever the balance, it's clear that faith here was a living, breathing experience, felt in every corner of life. As you near the edge of the village, the quiet murmur of a nearby stream greets you, a soft, steady sound that blends with the night's hush. Water was sacred in many ways, symbolizing purity, renewal, and life itself. The gentle ripple reminds you of the constant flow of time and change. Before you part ways with Jesus for the night, he pauses and looks up at the stars. "Rest well," he says softly. "Tomorrow brings new lessons, new stories, and the chance to live in grace." You nod, feeling the truth of those words settle deep within you. The night holds its promise of rest and renewal, a space where history's weight lifts and the soul can breathe. As you turn away, the village behind you sleeps peacefully, wrapped in the quiet embrace of ancient rhythms and timeless faith. Night settles gently over the village as you follow Jesus back through winding streets paved with worn stones, their surfaces smoothed by countless footsteps over generations. The air is cooler now, tinged with the faint scent of wood smoke curling from chimneys and the distant murmur of voices winding down for the day. You notice the soft glow of oil lamps flickering behind windows, casting warm pools of light onto the walls of humble homes. This interplay of light and shadow feels like a silent hymn, an ancient lullaby sung by the village itself as it prepares for rest. Jesus pauses outside a modest dwelling where a small group has gathered. Inside, the sound of voices rises in gentle song, a traditional hymn echoing softly into the night. Music was an essential part of life here, woven into celebrations, prayers, and even the telling of stories. It was a language of the heart, a shared expression beyond words. You remember reading that in ancient Judea, the harp and lyre were popular instruments, often accompanying such gatherings. Some scholars debate whether these musical moments were spontaneous community acts or more formalized religious ceremonies, but either way, they provided comfort and connection. As you step inside, the room feels warm and close, filled with the hum of conversation and the scent of freshly baked bread. The group welcomes you with nods and smiles, and you settle quietly in the corner, becoming part of this intimate circle. The conversation turns to teachings, passages from the Torah discussed with reverence and curiosity. Jesus listens attentively, occasionally offering gentle insights that challenge and uplift. The atmosphere is one of shared learning, a space where questions are valued as much as answers. You sense the importance of these gatherings, where faith was not just a solitary practice but a living, communal journey. Here, wisdom was passed from elders to youth, stories were preserved, and bonds strengthened. One quirky detail catches your ear. Some villagers used tiny clay whistles shaped like birds during festivals, believed to ward off evil spirits and invite joy. These simple instruments, crafted by local hands, remind you of how deeply creativity and belief intertwine in everyday life. Historians still argue about how much influence such folk customs had on mainstream religious practice, but their presence speaks to a vibrant culture alive with meaning and tradition. As the night deepens, voices soften, and the songs drift into silence. You feel a profound sense of belonging here, woven into the fabric of a people connected by history, faith, and hope. The flickering lamplight casts dancing shadows on the walls as you prepare to leave, carrying the warmth of this night's gathering with you like a gentle ember to light your way forward. The dawn arrives slowly, soft and diffused through the olive trees, as you find yourself once again walking alongside Jesus. The air carries a gentle chill, mingled with the scent of fresh earth and blooming wildflowers. A quiet awakening after the night's calm. You pass a small hillside where shepherds are already tending to their flocks. The sheep move with ease, their woolly bodies blending into the landscape's muted palette. The shepherds' voices rise in low calls, guiding their charges with practiced familiarity. It's a scene both timeless and comforting. Jesus pauses to pick up a smooth stone from the ground, turning it over thoughtfully. Sometimes, the smallest things can shape the greatest stories, he says, a knowing smile touching his lips. You recall how stones were more than just landscape features, they were tools, weapons, and symbols. From David's sling to boundary markers, stones carried stories and meaning far beyond their simple form. In fact, some scholars still debate the symbolism of stones in Judean culture. Were they primarily practical objects, or did their spiritual significance weave deeply into daily life and worship? The answer may be both, reflecting a world where the mundane and the sacred often overlapped. Nearby, a small group of women gathers water from a spring, their laughter light against the morning hush. They carry clay jars balanced expertly on their heads, moving with a grace born of routine and rhythm. You watch as Jesus gently shares a parable about a stone thrown into a pond, the ripple spreading outward, touching far-off shores. His words invite reflection on how small actions can echo through time, changing lives in ways unseen. The hillside around you feels alive with potential, a place where lessons unfold in the interplay of earth, water, and sky. The quiet hum of nature wraps around you, blending with the soft cadence of Jesus' voice. As the sun climbs higher, warming the land, you feel a deep sense of connection to this place, its people, and the stories that shape them. Here, in the simplicity of dawn, history and hope meet, inviting you to listen closely and carry their light forward. The morning light grows stronger as you continue your walk, the hills rolling gently toward the horizon. Birds chirp softly in the branches above, their songs weaving a delicate soundtrack to your thoughts. You notice how the landscape shifts, from rocky paths to patches of wildflowers nodding in the breeze, each detail painting a fuller picture of this ancient land. Jesus stops beside a small cluster of fig trees, their broad leaves casting cool shade on the dusty ground. He plucks a ripe fig and offers it to you, the sweetness a vivid contrast to the dry air. Eating here feels like a gift, a direct connection to the earth, the seasons, and the hands that tend these trees. You reflect on figs as a symbol throughout the scriptures, often representing prosperity, peace, and the presence of God's blessings. But figs were also a staple food, nourishing people through hard times. The tree's hardiness and fruitfulness mirrored the resilience expected of the community. Some scholars still debate whether fig trees were cultivated deliberately or often found growing wild on the margins of fields and paths. Either way, their presence is a constant in the story of life here. Nearby, a group of children play under the shade, their laughter a bright counterpoint to the quiet calm of the morning. They chase one another, calling out in a language that feels both ancient and immediate, reminding you that life continues, full of energy and hope. Jesus speaks softly about the fig tree's lessons, how sometimes it must shed old leaves to make room for new growth, a metaphor for change and renewal that resonates deeply. He encourages you to embrace these cycles, trusting that loss can lead to fresh beginnings. As you stand there, bathed in sunlight and the gentle hum of life, you feel the weight of centuries lift, replaced by a quiet invitation to move forward with faith and courage. The day has begun in earnest, yet this moment lingers, a soft pause filled with promise and the gentle assurance that even in the simplest things, there are profound lessons to carry with you on your journey. Night begins to fall over Jerusalem, cloaking the city in a soft, velvety darkness punctuated by the flicker of oil lamps in windows and courtyards. The temple stands majestic yet serene, its silhouette etched against the deepening sky. You feel the hum of anticipation in the air, the weight of countless prayers woven into the stones beneath your feet. Walking through the narrow alleys, you pass small groups of people, some whispering hurriedly, others sitting quietly in contemplation. The city is alive with stories, fears, hopes, and faith. It's a place where the past and future meet, where ancient traditions shape the lives of ordinary people facing extraordinary times. Jesus pauses by a quiet corner, looking out over the city's rooftops. Remember, he says softly, even in the darkest moments, light can be found. His words linger, a gentle beacon in the growing night. You think back to the journeys through olive groves, the songs by the fireside, the lessons from fig trees, and the warmth of community gatherings. Each memory forms a thread in the larger tapestry, a story of faith unfolding slowly, patiently, and powerfully. Scholars still debate many details of Jesus' final days, the exact sequence of events, the motivations of those involved, and the deeper meanings behind his actions. Yet, beyond the questions and controversies, the enduring message is clear, a call to love, hope, and transformation. As you stand there, bathed in the quiet glow of a city settling into rest, you feel a profound sense of peace. This moment, this place, holds the heartbeat of history and the whisper of promises yet to come. The stars shine brightly above Jerusalem tonight, ancient lights watching over a story that continues to inspire and challenge, to comfort and awaken. And as you prepare to leave this sacred space behind, a soft calm washes over you, an invitation to carry the lessons, the stories, and the quiet strength of this journey into your own life. The afternoon sun hangs low now, casting long shadows across the dusty paths of the village as you walk alongside Jesus toward the city of Jerusalem. The air feels charged with anticipation, both heavy and hopeful, as the heart of ancient Judea draws near. The city's walls rise up like silent witnesses, time-worn stones whispering secrets of kings, prophets, and pilgrims who have walked here before. You follow the narrow streets, lined with merchants packing up their stalls and children playing in the fading light. The vibrant pulse of the city is a mix of commerce, worship, and everyday life, all interwoven into a living tapestry that has seen centuries of history unfold. Jesus moves with purpose yet calm, his gaze steady on the horizon. You recall the stories he has shared, the parables, the teachings, the miracles, all building toward this moment. Jerusalem is more than just a place, it is a symbol of faith, conflict, and ultimate hope. The temple looms ahead, its massive stones towering above the cityscape. You think about the countless sacrifices offered here, the prayers whispered, and the debates held within these sacred courts. Historians still argue about the exact nature of the temple rituals during Jesus' time, and the degree to which political and religious tensions shaped the city's life. You glimpse a group of pilgrims making their way toward the temple, carrying small offerings and singing softly. Their faces reflect a mix of reverence and longing, a shared hope for peace, healing, and redemption. Nearby, vendors sell fragrant spices and fresh figs, their stalls bursting with colors and smells that seem almost overwhelming after the quiet of the countryside. This vibrant chaos is part of Jerusalem's character, a city of contrasts, where the sacred and the mundane collide. You remember the rooftop where you once sat with Jesus, the olive groves, the village gatherings, and the fig trees. All these moments have led here, woven into a story of faith lived boldly and humbly. As the sun dips below the horizon, casting a soft glow over the temple stones, you feel a deep stillness settle within. This city holds the hopes of many, the weight of history, and the promise of a new dawn. Jesus turns to you with a gentle smile. Here, the story changes, he says softly. And with it, the world. You breathe in the cool evening air, feeling the pulse of ancient life beneath your feet and the quiet stirring of something greater on the horizon. Now, as your eyelids grow heavy and the world around you softens into quiet, imagine yourself resting beneath that vast, star-studded sky. Feel the gentle breeze that whispers through ancient olive branches, carrying the scent of earth and promise. Let your breath slow and deepen, matching the steady rhythm of a land that has seen centuries of hope, struggle, and faith. Here, in this calm, there is room to let go, to release the day's worries and sink into peaceful stillness. Remember, history is not just about events long past, it lives in each breath, in every heartbeat, and in the gentle unfolding of your own story. Like the olive tree, may you grow patient and strong, rooted deeply yet reaching toward the light. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let the quiet carry you gently into dreams filled with peace, wisdom, and the timeless beauty of this ancient land. Sleep well. Sweet dreams.